Thank you very much for being here this morning. I'm glad to have with us Professor Ceo-DiFrancesco. Diana, if you let us call you by your first name.
Sure.
And she comes from the University of Xavier University, from Cincinnati, Ohio. And she's going to talk us about her experience teaching, probably.
Yes.
And thank you very much for being here.
Yes, thank you for coming today on this snowy day, right? I really want to talk to you first about, well, here are some of the topics I'm going to discuss. Briefly about what we think the acquisition process is, and also learning styles and strategies. So maybe you'll get some tips today. Maybe what I'm saying you've already heard, but maybe if you hear it again, maybe it'll make sense, or maybe you'll hear a new idea. I am going to talk a little bit about culture, and finally show you a few technology applications that we're using and some projects that I'm doing. So it should be exciting, I hope. You'll find it interesting. I want to talk to you about today's students, 21st century learners. What are they like? I can't make a generalization of all students in the United States. I'll tell you about my students at my university and say that it could be similar in other places. I think it is, but I never want to generalize that much. But today's students, many of them are all about technology and have their own devices, multiple devices. Sometimes we professors think that, you know, the age of research is sort of over because, you know, they don't want to go to the library and look up books and articles. You know, it's all about using the internet. And I know the educational systems are a bit different, but we're seeing that it's harder and harder these days to get students to memorize because everything is right there. You can find your answer in about 30 seconds on your phone. So why should you memorize dates anymore? You know, you can just look them up. It's simpler. We typically have students that will be connected and doing four different things at once. I've got my Facebook on, I have my phone here, I have my laptop, and whatever. So you're involved in at least 4 different technology applications at once. However, we always try to say that you can't really generalize that much, that on the other hand, we have students that may be without devices, and there are parts of the country where they don't have Wi-Fi, so not everybody has the same sophistication level as far as their use of technology. So that makes it even more challenging in the classroom. At our university, students without a laptop can go to the library and, you know, leave their ID and they can check out a laptop. So that's helpful. So we do have ways to help a student that doesn't walk around with a mobile device also. To tell you about what are their goals for language learning. The majority of students at many universities, not all, but many do have a language requirement, as you do, to learn English. So ours to learn another language. Beyond the requirement, I usually ask them, and their main goal is to be able to communicate. They'll say that. However, they have absolutely no idea what that means, how to actually get to that point. They really don't know what the process involves. There's a lot of confusion about what the word fluent means. A lot of people say, are you fluent? And now in Europe and in the United States we have descriptive levels so that we're able to more academically speak about, you know, how proficient someone is or how competent someone is in their communication skills instead of simply saying, you know, I'm fluent. But the general public would use the word fluent and not really know what that means. Also, historically in the US, I think there's more of a perhaps, I have here culturally negative attitude. I don't think it's negative, it's just that we haven't, about learning another language. Language learning has never had the same status as math, for instance. We lack funding starting early. And I think that may be the case here in Spain as well, although now I've heard that, you know, you have new laws that are you're getting English in your schools for your young people, and that's really where we need to start. Then on the other hand, administrators need to realize what type of programs those need to be so that we can really have effective programs, effective learning. In some sense, there can be a bit of ethnocentricity in the U.S., depending on where you live, smaller towns, people not really understanding the importance of learning another language or appreciating other cultures quite as much. But, so what do we know about what needs to take place to learn another language? The three components are input, output, and interaction. And this is, try to break it down into the simplest three components for my students who are learning to teach. If you are in a class or you're trying to learn, you want to have as much input, as much language, hearing the language as much as possible. Okay, and that doesn't mean that I can just go out on the street in New York City and I'm hearing English all day, but that doesn't mean I'm going to acquire any language if it doesn't make sense to me. So it has to be meaningful to you, right? Output means you have to be producing language. And by production, I don't mean that you're just reading an exercise out of a book. You have to actually be formulating your own thoughts and saying them. And finally, we need students to interact, because interaction is the essence of all communication. So that's what language is about. So you need a lot of practice interacting with others. Understanding your learning style and learning strategies are really, really important because it helps you to become a more effective language learner, and it helps your practice to be more effective. One of the research projects that I did a while back was I really wanted to get into the brains of my beginning language learners and find out, you know, what was going on. And instead, I mean, I didn't have any access to MRI equipment to take scans of their brains. So what I did was interviewed them, videotaped the interviews, and then immediately following the interview, I sat down with them and we actually watched the videos together. And I also recorded an interview I did with them in English, stopping the recording at various points and asking them, what were you thinking there? What was going on in your brain there? And of course, it was all recorded and transcribed, and I learned a lot. One of the things I learned is that a lot of students have no clue what their best learning style is. Some do, but some have no clue, and they actually learned it during the interview watching themselves. For instance, there would be, and I want to tell you extremely short moments, you know, seconds, where I could tell they were thinking, that their brain was going, and I would say, what are you thinking about there? And one student said, I'm trying to remember the word for whatever it was, brother, or whatever she wanted to say. And she said, but actually, I didn't really realize I'm doing this, but my brain is going through all of my flashcards, flipping through all of my flashcards until I get to the right word I want to use. And it was really just a split second, so it was amazing to me but she's a visual learner. So what I tell my students is, think about when you take an exam, what is the way that you recall information to take the exam? Does your brain see words on your book, on your page, or in your notebook, or something that was written on the board in class? Then you're a visual learner. Auditory learners will report that they remember because they remember what was said in class. They remember what their classmates said. They remember what their teacher said. So it's all from listening that they are able to recall. During my project, I interviewed one student, and during the interview, he had a pen, and he kept hitting his leg over and over again. It was very annoying. And so then when I did the interview with him, I said, what are you doing with your pen? And he said, that just kind of helps me remember. So if you are a kinesthetic learner, it means that, you know, you really need some activity going with your body. It helps you remember, or you learn better by doing something. And you can be a combination, and there are many more descriptors of learning styles, and these are only the basic ones. But have you ever sat next to somebody who's taking a test and they're tapping their pencil and you think it's the most annoying thing in the world? Or the instructor will say, stop that, you know, and then now I think that poor student now doesn't have any way to remember. So, but these are all, it's really helpful for you if you can identify what is your preferred style, because flashcards for learning vocabulary would not work for you very well if you're an auditory learner. You would be much better to have some recordings of words on, you know, a mobile device, and you could be listening as you're headed off to your commute or whatever. So You know, you have to know your preferred style. Or if you're kinesthetic, maybe just taking Post-its and labeling things in your house or somewhere, so you're actually moving and doing something. Okay? So what about the role of input in the language process? We know that learners have a need for context and meaningful input. What do you do if you have absolutely no idea? If you have no idea what you're hearing, what do you do? Like these people. They have no idea what's going on. So what is it that you do? Or maybe you're in class and you hear Charlie Brown's teacher. Do you know about Charlie Brown's teacher? Have you ever seen Charlie Brown?
Never.
So I'll have to show you. But Charlie Brown's teacher, and when he sits in class, if you watch one of the little cartoons, his teacher says, wah, 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 wah. And so we don't understand that in English or Spanish or any other language, right? So one time I had a class of beginners, and I had this group of 4 guys, and every time I walked in the class, they were already waiting for me. I unpacked, I got everything ready, and I would speak to them because input is so important, right? And so about halfway through the semester, the student said to me, "Oh my gosh." He said, "I can understand you." He said, "The beginning of the semester until now, you were just Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah." He said, "Now I can actually understand you." So it clicked for him, but it was after a lot of input. So what do you do when you can't understand? I have a short, funny video to show you about understanding language.
Mayday, mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
So, yeah, it kind of gives us a notion that we need some comprehension skills. We need some strategies. So what do you do when you go to class and you don't understand? Or what do you do when you're out on the street and you hear some English and you don't understand? The key strategies that students tell me work are obviously listening only for key words, realizing that you don't have to understand every single word. And if you have your learning style is really technical, you might want to think, oh, I need to understand everything. But of course, it's better if you you might only understand 4 words, and then you have to piece it together. So one of the really important things is that you're open to ambiguity. And some of us have a harder time with that than others. I say, guess, right? But you have to be definitely look for visual cues, listen for some words that we call cognates that are similar to other words. Imagine that you're on your cell phone, your mobile phone, and you're out on the street and your friend calls. So what do you do to understand your friend in Spanish? You're on the street, so this truck goes by, there's a lot of noise. This is all you hear. You hear your friend's name, you hear party, fiesta, you hear tonight, and you hear where. So you only heard 4 words, but you got it, didn't you? And then you said, see you later, I'll be there, right? And so you need to do the same thing when you're learning another language to understand, because just to realize that all it took was 4 words and I pieced it together. And if you're wrong, who cares? I mean, you'll ask a question I don't understand and, put it together that way. I did another project on target language use by instructors, all levels, 250 teachers in the US, because in my area where I am in the Midwest, was noticing that a lot of teachers are not teaching in the target language. They're teaching most of their classes in English, sometimes with good intentions and not really realizing it. But if students don't get the input, if you're not hearing a lot of English, you're not going to be able to understand a lot of English, and you're not going to eventually get to be able to produce it. So I asked teachers to project for me in a questionnaire what their goal was, how much percentage of a class period did they want to be speaking in the target language, and then I wanted them to rate their actual use. And you can see from this what kind of actual use we get versus goal. I think a lot of teachers have really good intentions, but their actual goal might be nowhere near what their actual use may be nowhere near what their goal is. You have to look, this graph is actually, this table is actually 2 tables. In any event, the thing to remember about actual target use and self-reporting is that it's a little bit off, and we know that from research, because if you think about it, when you go to the dentist, I don't know about the dentist here, but the dentist at home, they always say, well, do you floss every day? And of course, I lie and I say, yeah, I floss every day. So I think the teachers, you know, the instructors, when they reported, that can be quite off as well. I mean, you want it to make it sound better than it really is, right? Or if your doctor says, do you eat your vegetables every day? And you go, yes. And I take my vitamins every day? Yes. You know, but we don't always say exactly what we do. So, and what about grammar? How does grammar come into a language class? Here's Calvin and Hobbes. He thinks you guys are ahead anyhow. Is desk masculine? Is chair feminine? Foreign kids know, but we don't. We wonder we can't, no wonder we can't compete in the global market. I demand sex education. He says, I wonder if her doctor knows she mixes all those medications. Do you know Calvin? He's very funny. In any event, grammar is great. I know you've had years of grammar studies. And now we're at the point where, you know, if your classes should be all in English, and you should be really pushing yourself to speak in class, right, and outside of class. I always tell my students and the teachers I'm training that grammar is their GPS. Grammar is their map, but it's not our end goal. So that's how we have to look at it. We need a context and we need content and a context. And with language learning, what do we know from brain research to help us? We know that learning needs to be meaningful, okay? And also, your brain will make a conscious or an unconscious decision about what's important to remember, what's significant to remember, and it's often based on emotion. If it's emotionally significant to you, then your brain will make a conscious or unconscious decision to remember that, okay? The brain's also looking for patterns and making connections, right? What do we know about anxiety in language learning? Well, students that I interviewed, you know, after the original interview in the target language, students said things like they were trying to remember a specific word, and then they couldn't remember it. All of a sudden, they just went into a really quick panic, and all the Spanish went out of their brain. So I don't know if that ever happens to you, that you're looking for something specific, you can't find it, you begin to panic, and then it's like, where did the English go? It's not in my brain anymore. And the same thing actually happens when you're trying to understand, that if you are really anxious about hearing a lot of English, your brain just kind of shuts down on you and you can't understand anything. Have you ever had that happen to you? Yes? And what about when you're trying to produce, if you're in a situation where, I don't know, maybe it's a mean instructor or someone that makes you a little nervous to begin with, and then you're supposed to speak. Sometimes, you know, the words get all jumbled. They don't come out right. You don't produce it right. You make mistakes that you normally know, oh, I know how to say that, but it didn't come out right. And that all has to do with anxiety. And so you go into this panic. So what can you do about that? You know, obviously, the more often you put yourself in a situation where you're taking risks, where you're making yourself speak, the better it'll get for you. And definitely, we want you in situations where you're producing language, where you're interacting with others. When you produce language, you notice gaps. You notice what you don't know when you're put into a situation where you're speaking. Oh, I just realized I don't know that grammatical structure, or I learned it in class, but I've never used it, I don't remember it. Or maybe it's that you're in a situation where now I can try out that structure that I've just learned. That could be the case too. But you know, interaction is the basis for communication, so this is what we want you to be doing as constantly as we can. So I say there are some, what's really helpful for our brain is there are some chunks that our brain can actually learn as, you know, as an unanalyzed chunk. So a series of words that we can just learn as a chunk. And usually it happens to our brain. We absorb it because we've heard it repeatedly in input. So it might be something that your instructor says over and over again in class that, you know, it's just a memorized chunk for you. And it gives you kind of a head start on things. Or maybe if you're doing a lot of listening outside of class and you like a certain program that you watch, so there are probably things that are repeated that you can remember as a memorized chunk as well. But what happens when we can't think of the right word? Instead of going into a panic, we need to train ourselves to use circumlocution. Do you do this in class? Or do you grab your mobile device and look up the word? Do you like to look up the words? Or do you try to, because I'm not a fan of a dictionary, and so I tell teachers that I'm training that they are not supposed to be their students' dictionary, okay? So I would prefer that we push the students to try to think of a different way to say something, because you're using even more language when you do that. And so you couldn't think of the right word. Well, can't you say it a different way? And I can tell you how many times that helped me when I was just out traveling. Oh, I couldn't think of the exact word I wanted, but I figured out how to get my point across. And that's what we want you to do. So this is a very important skill, and you should start trying to do it immediately if you don't, and not rely so much on your dictionary. Okay? And risk-taking, which I already mentioned, you just really have to kind of put yourself out there. There are two kinds of producers that I learned in my the interviews I did with students. There are students that actually plan everything out in their brain before they produce it. So I don't know if you're like that. I have students that actually said they rehearsed the pronunciation of the entire sentence they wanted to say before they said it. So they rehearsed it in their brain, put it all together in their brain, and then practiced the pronunciation before they produced it. Those I called planners. Okay? So are you a planner? Do you kind of want to have it all ready before you say it? Or are you a non-planner? And the non-planners obviously are those people that you envy if you're a planner, because they just kind of blurt it out. And however it comes out, it comes out. So what are you? If you're a planner, it's a little harder for you to take risks. But you have to really force yourself to put yourself out there and just start saying things. And if they come out wrong, oh well. It came out wrong. It might come out right next time, but who cares, right? So do you know what you are? Do you plan, or do you just say things? You're a non-planner? Oh, good. I say good because it's a little easier for you to be a risk taker, but if you're a planner, that's okay too. And we say, I love this quote that, you know, you don't really, if you can't use a language, you don't know a language. So you have to keep pushing yourself to use it, right? Oh, and I threw up here some interesting errors, talking about, you know, making mistakes. Okay, what about if you make an error? Here's some really funny ones, perhaps, I don't know, interesting ones that I might see in Spanish. Other ones that I see are things like, instead of using divertirse, to say I had fun, you know, it's translated word for word, you know, to have a good time. They'll say, tengo un buen tiempo, you know, it's like, or ducharse, they'll say, tomé una ducha, you know, just translation, literal translation, and you guys don't talk like that, so it doesn't make any sense. So what do we do about errors? If practice in brain research, if we practice something wrong 10 times, our brain has learned it 10 times the wrong way. So if you finally notice that you said it correctly, what should you do? Like, be happy? Oh, I practiced it wrong 10 times, but now I got it right, and that's it, and we drop it? No, basically for your brain, you need to do it again immediately. Do the same thing correctly again, so that your brain now has recorded the correct way to say something. So that really helps the error correction in the practice. What about culture? Can we learn a language without learning the culture? What do you think?
I think that's something difficult. Sometimes I think that you need to empathize with the culture that speaks that language if you want to really learn it. Let's say if you, don't know, to test the Dutch, you can hope to really learn Dutch, for example.
Yeah, and I could learn the words, but if I don't know the culture, it becomes difficult. It's not impossible, but I think they have to go hand in hand. So you have to take some, I'm going to give you lots of examples to convince you, but also so that you can see how they go together. So embedded in communication are the cultural norms of a society, or also the way people think, and maybe the values that drive their behavior. And did you know that if I look up in the dictionary the word culture, I came up with 160 definitions. So it's also not a very easy thing to define, right? So how do we go about teaching some sort of culture in a language class so that you don't sit there and say, well, we don't know the difference, doesn't matter, right? I think they're inextricably connected. So somehow we have to integrate culture in a way that makes sense for students. So that, because I think it's impossible to understand a culture without taking into account the language and vice versa, okay? Your speech sends a social message, doesn't it? In the US, we tend to, when we see someone, we'll say, hi, how you doing? And a Latin American would stand there and expect to answer, okay? But the student from the US is already gone because we don't expect an answer. We don't expect a conversation. Hi, how you doing is just like saying hello. But I ask you how you're doing, but I didn't really expect an answer. How is it here? Do you say that? You say, hola, ¿qué tal? But you don't really expect the other person to answer? Or do you wait for them to answer before you go on walking? What do you do? What do you do? You think you wait? I think, well, my sense is culturally you might have placed more importance in the person with whom you're speaking. So, it's a cultural thing. Latin Americans would even ask about, how's your family? Would you say, how's your brother, or how's your family? Would that be part of your conversation with the person? Not so much? Not so much. Okay. And so I'm putting visuals up to give you a sense of also some of the, maybe a cultural difference. What do you see here? Obviously Starbucks, and it's a bank. What is that? Do you know what that is? It's a drive-through. Do you know about drive-throughs? Have you seen them in the movies? Is that how you know? Or you've been traveling a bunch? So I threw some terms up here that, would you know about these things? Because some of them are cultural, like a to-go box. We used to call it, and that was when I was a kid, we used to call it a doggy bag, which is even more bizarre of a term, right? What is that? When we go to dinner, in the US, everything's big. So, we think it's good, we're getting
The leftovers.
Right, everything for our value. If we have this huge meal, and if you eat it all, well, you have a weight problem then. But if you don't eat it, then you want to be able to take the leftovers home. So is that something you do here? No. So it's very different, right? Drive-through, we have drive-through everything. We have drive-through pharmacy, drive-through dry cleaners, drive-through the Starbucks, of course, and the bank, and I don't know what else. I'm missing something. Well, the coffee, yes. Layaway, do you know what layaway is? And layaway is coming back in these bad economic times because layaway was very popular maybe in the 70s, because parents would want to buy these toys for their kids, and they would go to like Kmart or Walmart, one of the big stores, and pick out the toys, but they didn't have enough money to pay for them. So they'd put a little bit of cash down, and the store would have to hold the items, and so you would put it on layaway. And then you'd have to go in and pay a little bit more until you finally paid it off, and you could take them home and wrap the gifts for Christmas or birthday or whatever. And takeout. I was in Toledo the other day, and they had the sign, they were trying to write in English. They said, coffee to take away, because that's maybe not so popular here, coffee to take away. So in the States, that's what we live on now. I mean, everyone's carrying around a paper cup with a plastic lid. You got to go get your coffee, and we have it in our cars, and we have it in our offices, and we have it in class, and everybody has but we don't call it takeaway coffee. We call it takeout. Okay. So here, one time I was on a tour with a lot of professors from the U.S., and none of them knew Spanish. None of them had ever been to Spain before, and we went to a little town in Catalonia, and we got there. In the middle of the, mid-morning, everyone wanted a cup of coffee, right? They all got off the bus saying, we're going to go get some coffee. And I didn't even think to tell them anything because I thought, well, I'm going to go have my coffee. I'm going to go to the bar. I'm going to ask for café con leche. I love the coffee here, so I'm a great coffee fan, so I enjoyed my coffee. I went back to the bus. Everyone was so mad because they said, no coffee to go around here. They all wanted the paper cup to go. They couldn't find it. What about thrift stores? I don't know how popular they are if you have them. In the US, depends on where you live. I'm not going to make any stereotypes for the whole country, but we have some pretty nice, classy thrift stores, secondhand clothing. And some with still tags on them, or some very nice quality clothing, and people go there to shop, and it's not too unusual anymore. You know, that you can find a nice leather jacket, or, you know, a nice pair of jeans, or shoes you like, whatever. And also we do a lot of donations. So there's a lot of recycling of clothing, but not everyone is going to be up for that. You know, certain folks in different social circles might not be into buying secondhand clothing, but it's another term that maybe you don't have. Garage sales, that's something you probably don't have here. You clean out your house, you decide, I really don't like these flowers anymore and this vase or whatever, and then you put everything out for your front yard and you put little price tags on them. And it's a whole game that people play, because then the buyers will come by and, well, it's similar to a flea market, except that you do it at your home. And so you might think that's really odd, and you probably never heard the term. And I just put big on there because there's, you know, everything is impressive. It's big. And we have some of these big warehouse stores that you buy a pizza. Well, it's the biggest pizza you've ever seen with the biggest size pieces of meat on it that you've ever seen in your life, you know. So everything is big. So, but my point is that the meaning is not in the words. It's in the minds. So that's how the culture is the foundation of our behavior and our communication. So that's interesting, right? I'll show you some translation blunders to give you some more food for thought. The manager has personally passed all the water served here. Doesn't really work very well for us. So please leave your values at the front desk. These are supposed to be funny. I'll give you the slides so you can talk about them later in class. And then our nylons cost more than common, but you'll find they are the best in the long run. You know, nylons do run. So, also, here's some international business blunders. There are many of these you can find on the internet. But Taiwan, the slogan, "Come alive with the Pepsi generation." It didn't translate right. Pepsi will bring your ancestors back from the dead. And the Australian airline Emu that had image problems because that's a bird that doesn't fly. What are some other ones, you know? The fast food company put the Saudi flag on the packaging, but it's not something that you would crumple up after you ate your hamburger and throw it away. That just didn't go over too well. And then another company that put smiling babies on the little jars that you buy of food, but in a certain country, they were used to seeing the contents of what they bought on the package. That wasn't too good either. So then there are these you know, linguists and psychologists that actually link language to how you perceive color and how you perceive movement and how you perceive space. And there's this one fellow, oh, I thought, okay. Hold on, here's some other thoughts about cultural observation. For instance, in Taiwan, you wouldn't want to sit like this because you wouldn't want to show the sole of your foot. In Saudi Arabia, you don't want to refuse a cup of coffee because it's such a friendly offer, it would be seen as an affront. Okay, what about in India? You would not want to discuss business in the home or on a social occasion. It would be a violation of your host's hospitality. Oh, and then look at this. Have you ever been in this situation where people come and they're taking pictures of you? Okay, let's take pictures of the natives, Burl. Okay, and there they are in the diner, and here come the Japanese tourists, and they say, well, let's take pictures of the natives. So, but there's this fellow named Keith Chen that I read about, and he actually did some studies. He's an economist, and he tried to bring linguistics into a study about, you know, how people invest. That's what I was saying about how psychologists and linguists are studying how language has something to do also with how we perceive everything around us, space, colors, movement. And he wanted to know if it also had an effect on how we invest money. So he found that languages that separate grammatically present from future, those societies, those cultures do not save as much as languages that do not separate present tense from future tense. So very interesting, right? And you can read about, he has some articles online, you can read about them. But also kind of interesting is to think about, okay, what is your image of bread? If I would just say, close your eyes and imagine, you know, when I say bread, what do you imagine? Do you imagine French baguette from the bakery? Do you imagine the mushy pan bimbo, you know, that you can roll up in a ball and throw across the room? Do you, what is your image of bread? Is it flat bread, like a tortilla mexicana? You know, what is it? So, and how about coffee? When I say coffee, what's your image? Is it café con leche? Is it a huge cup of café au lait? Is it the take-out cup? You know, the paper cup with the plastic lid. So, and what about kitchen? Does your kitchen, your image of kitchen include a table and chairs in the kitchen? Does it include a washer and dryer in the kitchen or next to the kitchen? What about house? So really, all these terms have a cultural aspect to them too. And what about greetings and how we say hello, how we say goodbye? What about buying fruit? You know, are you allowed to touch all the fruit and pick out every piece you want? The first time I did that in France, the vendor screamed at me because I was supposed to tell him what I wanted, how much, you know, the weight was, and then he would pick it all out and weigh it and hand it to me. But I wasn't used to that, so it's a cultural practice that's very different. Or how about Latin Americans that in some countries, you know, it's not really a good plan to, if you walk into someone's house and they offer you something to drink, you don't accept the first time, you wait for them to offer you the drink 3, 4, 5 times, and then after that it's time to accept. Okay? What about your perspective of time? What is time? Is time sequential, or is time just like the air that you breathe? What's your perspective on time? Or what about nature? Is nature something that we try to control, or is this something that we try to live in harmony with nature? And what about gestures? You realize that when you speak another language, you can't use all the same gestures that are part of you that you typically use when you're speaking Spanish. They don't really transfer. And that's sometimes problematic, right? So we always have to keep that in mind. When we're learning a new language, actually learning the gestures are really important. So, something to think about. I want to show you some of my, some technology applications that we're using, and maybe you can share some of yours. One thing I'm doing that I've been working on recently is using virtual conference meeting software and trying to test how that affects a beginning student, what kind of results we get using that. So I wanted to show you some examples of meeting software using Adobe Connect. We also have WebEx, which is another application that's virtual meeting software. There's some free ones, of course, Skype. Then there's something called uvu. You can have up to maybe 11 people, you know, at the same time on uvu. The nice thing, however, about WebEx or Adobe Connect is that you can upload documents, which you'll see in a minute. You can upload documents. You can share screens. So I can pass, if I'm in charge, I can pass my screen along to you. I can upload documents. There's also IM chat on there. There's a whiteboard, so you can write on the screen as well. I don't know, have you ever used this? Some have, some haven't. What I'm doing is, I think it's so important that our students get some experience using this, because I think, you know, gee, every day our world is opening up more and more that, you know, you all, when you go out to get a position somewhere, it may be required. And wouldn't it be great if you were, felt really comfortable conducting a meeting in English using some virtual meeting software? Okay? So if you're practicing your English using the software now, attending a meeting in the future would be no problem, right? We also use IM chat. Discussion boards, they're cool. If you use Moodle, do you use discussion boards ever? Where your professor might post a topic, and then everyone's required to, at this point, you're writing in about it on a discussion board. You're just writing your opinion. So whatever topic you might be working on in class, or maybe something you've read about, and then everyone will write an opinion. And it's similar to a blog, because then, you know, I could also write about what you wrote about, make other comments. And your professor could actually require you to write 3 comments, for instance. And so it's like a homework assignment, but it's the beginning of an interaction that takes place outside of the classroom. As well, VoiceThread is similar, but VoiceThread is not free, so you know, there's a cost involved. The nice thing about VoiceThread is it's similar to the discussion board, except that you can use audio as well. You can upload a painting, for instance, and have everyone comment about it. So any kind of visual you can upload, and then have all of your comments around the visual. And Google Voice is free. Google Voice, we try to explore a lot of applications for getting students to speak and record, and this could be an individual speaking assignment, or it could be a paired assignment, or actually in groups of 3. So any ways that you can record yourself and be able to listen back. And then a way that you can actually send your recording via email to your instructor. So I don't know how familiar you are with recording yourselves. I see you have technology here and that you're doing recordings, right? So Google Voice is something you could explore because it's free. So you can actually have fun with it, sending things to your friends, right? So you make a little recording and then just send it off via email or whatever to somebody. And we have some software in our language center called Sony Soloist, which is really cool. There are many more things to do with it than I have even explored at this point, but I can, you know, it looks like a computer lab, except that I can pair students randomly. I can pair their screens. I can click on a student and then project their screen, which is really nice because if you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, then I can see it and I can project it. And then everyone can see, and I can, when I pair you, then I can actually enable a chat box. And so then I had students once, they were chatting, they were saying, I didn't do the reading, did you? And I said, and the other person said, I didn't either, so I projected it. And so everyone saw, okay, they didn't do the readings. But the students like it because they can also come in on their own time and they can practice recording, listening. They can also correct. And so it's a great way to work on pronunciation as well. But it's giving you an opportunity outside of class to work on fluency, to work on pronunciation, and also to make you feel more comfortable, you know, because I think the biggest step for you is pronunciation, speaking. And then there's a software called Tell Me More. Have you heard of it? So this is one that, well, it has about 4,000 pages of work. If you printed it in several different languages, the company's out of France, Orlog it's called. But why I liked Tell Me More, it does have voice recognition. So that there are some pronunciation exercises, and then it'll rate your pronunciation. And so you can keep trying to match the Spaniard who's speaking or match the English speaker. And you know, of course, there are only certain dialects represented, but you can practice your pronunciation and have at least somebody tutoring you, showing you, okay, whether you match or not. Okay, so it's interesting. I want to show you an example of what I've called language coaching. It's a new program that I started last fall, and it was actually offered through a publisher. But it was an individual who, a Spaniard, you'd like to know, that was teaching Spanish in the US and became very creative. She was actually displaced from New Orleans and thought, no, how can I keep teaching languages? I'm not at my university now. She had to move to Houston, so she started her own online business. And a publisher picked it up, and what she did was she went to Guatemala, Antigua, Guatemala, where they have a large number of Spanish language institutes. And she went to probably every little institute in town before she found Susie. Susie and her husband run a language institute, and Susie is extremely creative and was not afraid of doing something new, which is great to, you know, a great way to be. And also Susie's husband is a technology guy, tech guy, so that helped a little bit. They were trained, and then it started just with Susie being the language coach. Now, when you think of coach, you think of like a trainer, like an athletic trainer. So some people would pay a trainer at a gym to work with you, to get you, like, that's what I need, you know, to tell me exactly what I need to do, and then here's how I practice it so that I can get in better shape and I can run more than a mile a day. So, so it's that kind of thing. It's not a tutor. We purposely did not call it a tutor. It's a coach. Okay? So the students meet for 30 minutes in virtual sessions, 5 students or less with the coach. And basically they're having conversations and they're reviewing what they did in class more or less, but more in a relaxed way. And so I wanted to show you a little bit of what it looks like. These are just screenshots. So on the top screenshot, you have one of my students who was great, creative, and a lot of fun to have in class, but not really so interested in doing any academic work, really. Besides, this was Halloween, so he really didn't want to have his coaching session. So I found this on a, and all of the sessions are taped. So thank you. So I can go back and watch later. So when I found this, I decided to grab this screenshot because Halloween, he just decided to write over all the work and, you know. And on the bottom, you can see that this is another student that had a one-on-one session, and it's the beginning of the semester. So students had to upload photos of themselves and then practice describing their family. So she was practicing describing. Here's one live that I can show you. This is Susie with a student of ours, and they have a little conversation. And Susie has her mic up too high, I'm sorry, so she's a little bit loud. Okay, my mouse went away again. There.
¿Conoces Centroamérica? Ah, mira, es mi madre. Hola, mamá. Hola. Hola. Ahora, Paul, ¿conoces a mi madre? No conozco tu madre. Ahora,
He's speaking.
ella es mi madre y se llama Toribia y tiene 75 años. Tiene muchos años. Y ella dice, yo quiero conocer al estudiante. Y yo digo, bueno, él es Paul.
His name is Paul, but she calls him Paul.
En la universidad y es muy joven. ¿Sí? Sí.
Eso
sí. Adiós. Adiós. Mira, es bueno para el verbo conocer. ¿Sí? Ahora tú conoces a mi madre. Y también, ahora estoy en mi casa. Esta es mi casa. ¿Miras mi casa? Sí. Sí, es la parte ahora de... el jardín, las flores, y hay mucho sol. Sí. Sí, y también muchas flores. Y mi madre le gusta el sol. Sí, muchas flores. Sí, es normal.
So I was trying to get the mouse. So you get the idea. I wanted to show you briefly, if the mouse will come up. This is a session with 5 students. So it's a little different. It's not one-on-one. But you see that in the last slide, you saw that there is also an electronic textbook. So pages from the electronic textbook can be put on the screen so they can kind of review a little bit of that GPS and do conversation. I'm not sure why this isn't responding. Here. So they're laughing because they're a group of young girls, and she just asked what did they thought about the guy that was in the photo. So this coach was very creative because she would put up photos of Guatemala, right?
Sí, y aquí hay otro. ¿Lo miran? Hombre. Sí.
She's actually doing prepositions with them, on top of, underneath, next to, and she can use the green arrow to ask them where things are. So.
Y
I wanted to show you this other photo she put up because, oh.
¿Hay taxis donde vives? ¿Muchos o pocos?
They talk about taxis, and this is a little taxi they use in Guatemala. So she can also bring culture into the lesson. The nice thing about the program is that, you know, it's all, if it's laptop based, they could take their laptop and go to the market and show the student the market or the plaza, or like you saw, Susie took her laptop to her house and then showed the student her house, her patio, and her mother. These are preliminary data based on some of these questions. Some of the comments from the students, obviously. I was looking for more cultural, global learning kind of results, but with beginning students, I didn't get that. What I did get was definitely comfort level went up, anxiety went down, and students felt that it was really great for pronunciation practice. They felt so much better working in the small group with the virtual coaching and then going to class and being able to do a lot more. And we're seeing results this year that students producing language far beyond what they've done ever before. Here's another program that I started working on last summer. And I was able to utilize a network we have of Jesuit universities, because Xavier's a Jesuit university, in the US and in Latin America. So we have this network that's been created. We're doing something called a dual immersion program. So they link me with another professor, and we're linking our classes. And so far, I mean, I would much rather use WebEx because we could upload documents, but the universities in Latin America prefer to use Skype, so we're using Skype. And so I've done work with 3 universities so far. The top right picture is a student communicating with a student in Colombia, the Javeriana. And then on the bottom 2 slides are students talking to students in Ecuador, in Quito. And the learning that takes place is beyond imagination. You know, there's a lot of cultural information that the students learn, as well as linguistic information. They're given a topic, and they speak 20 minutes in Spanish, and then they speak 20 minutes in English. And also now we've started working with Universidad Centroamericana in Managua, Nicaragua. And last week we didn't have enough students on our side, so I also joined in with a student. And his English was amazing. It was amazing. He was 18 years old, and he told me that he started learning English for the first time last year. And I was just blown away. So I couldn't wait to ask him, so what do you do? You know, what are you doing to learn English this well, so quickly? And he wants to be an English teacher. And he said, everything, you know, everything he can get his hands on. He reads online, he watches YouTube videos, he watches movies, he finds people on the internet to talk to, he does everything. Everything you can possibly do to get the input, to produce language and to interact. So just to give you some ideas of what you might want to do on your own, or ask your professors, you know, see what we can work out to get something going through technology. And there's more to come because we can't keep up with the technology. Our university is behind, but we're looking to all kinds of online applications. To, you know, the push in the States is to offer online classes. And I think, you know, there are a lot of language classes that are being offered online. So it's something else that we're looking forward to. Mobile devices, use of mobile devices. So just some food for thought. So what questions or comments do you have? What are you doing here? Or what questions do you have based on what you've seen?
Are these all activities that are happening inside the classroom?
Yes, well, no, the virtual coaching sessions happen outside of class time. So I'm actually requiring an extra 30 minutes, but since students don't do homework anyhow, you know, it's okay, I think, because it's 30 minutes that it's good practice for you. And at least our students, it's really hard to get students to do work outside of the classroom. I don't know about here. Maybe you all are really good students and you spend hours. We tell them they should be spending 2 hours for each hour they spend in class, but I don't think they do. I actually asked my students at the beginning of last semester, and the report I got was 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And then someone else was really truthful and said, before a test, 40 minutes. It's like, oh my gosh. Okay, now I know what I'm working with, you know? Okay? Other questions?
My question is more for students rather than for you. And it wasn't in the same idea if they would really participate. If we offered I wonder if they'd participate if we offered them an exchange with your university, for example, because I think that their motivation is high for a start. They would say, yes, we want to participate. But I'm not so sure that they'd do, in fact, when the moment arrives.
I can tell you what I'm doing with the dual immersion now. I have yet to, and I may be forced to in the future if the numbers grow, because right now we're only doing 2 classes, mine and I've got another colleague that joined in this semester. So I'm doing it during class time, because then I can monitor everything. But it may get to the point where there will have to be a sign up and you go and you make an appointment and show up to do your, and then students write a report each time after they have a conversation. They're required to write a 2-page informe, what they learned. I had a student terrified the first day last semester. She was, you notice that some work in pairs and some work individually. I had to buy some splitters because if there's a class that's smaller that I'm working with, then students will pair up and talk to another student, and vice versa. So this student had expected to be working in a pair, but her partner didn't show up that day. So this was the first day, and she was completely terrified. She came up to me at the computer monitor and said, I can't do this. And I said, yes, you can do this. And she was freaking out. And at the end, after it was over, she came up, big smiles, and said she had a great time, and of course apologized for all the anxiety. And I totally understood, you know, because it is a different level that you're putting yourself for your production, for what you have to understand, and you know, your one-on-one. But the gains are immense in every way. I mean, motivation levels are going up, enthusiasm for, and of course, students are looking each other up on Facebook and, you know, exchanging all kinds of whatever, you know, continuing or not communication outside of class. And for us so far, it hasn't been the same student every time. It's a different student almost every time, which has advantages and disadvantages. So you think you would like to do that?
Yes, but can I ask you a question? How do you manage to get all these recordings and then the video recording? Do you have a lab, sort of lab?
Yes.
Or this is what we need here?
You mean this facility here? Is a language, we don't call it a lab anymore, we call it a language center, but it's just a room that would be a basic computer room. But I did, when I first piloted the program last spring, I went out and bought like 12 cameras. And then when I got it started, of course, then I got the head of technology to come and watch the students. And it's a big thing for them when they see that, well, we have students that would love to travel to practice their language, but they can't afford to. We have a lot of students like that, and we'd love to see them go abroad and study for an entire year or semester, but they can't. So those students are now, with this experience, finding this is a way that they can, you know, learn from others, feel like they're experiencing culture, and really push their language skills.
It's not an expensive way to do so.
Right, it's not as expensive. For the student, it's not, for sure. And so I did push for funding to get more cameras.
Well, the problem was we tried to do that last semester, but it was a bit of a mess because the students had to find their own resources and meet at times when the other students, I mean, the times in the 2 universities.
Oh, the time change is immense. Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot of time.
Yes.
With the management, not with practicing the language.
Right, and we have certain rules that we have to follow. I mean, you know, give or take, we have to be a little flexible in education. So the idea is that you're connected 10 minutes prior to the appointment time, you know, so, and it's funny, I think the, how is it, the Latin Americans complain that we don't have our technology right, And of course, what are the US profs complaining that maybe they're not quite on time? So it's interesting. And then you have to work with different, you know, of course the demands are that we reach a certain, we have certain technology. But I think there's, you know, internet connections, you know, I'm noticing already it's different between Ecuador and Nicaragua. There's a big difference. So, any other questions, comments?
Just one comment about the student in Nicaragua that you said that started learning English
last year.
And I agree with that student as you have also to put a lot of effort on and try to use any means available in order to learn another language, and that is something that is nowadays very easy. At least it is easier than years before. Because, for example, I started learning English in the pre-internet days.
Right. What did we have? We had nothing, so.
So you understand. But now, it is really easy to, for example, look something in the internet in English, like, for example, finding information or on an encyclopedia article or reading a newspaper.
Anything.
Which years ago was kind of required quite an effort, not only in time locating that resource, but also in money. And now you only have, well, your internet access at a flat rate, and go ahead. And you can find things that were difficult, like, for example, well, watching films, which is nowadays it is easier. I remember when I was a kid that we went a couple of times a year with our English teacher in high school to a movie theater in order to see a film in English.
Right, and it was a big deal, right?
Now you can go, instead of plugging in your web browser and access directly to Netflix or Hulu, and see loads of films, TV series, and like, also captioned sometimes.
And the music.
And the
I mean,
music.
because you all love the music, so, you know, take advantage. So, I mean, you have everything at your fingertips now. You have so many resources that you can use, so use them.
Yes, and also having a kind of personal interest in learning the language for a specific reason helps a lot.
Right.
Whether it is, for example, being up to date with the latest technology in some field, or the latest video games, or music, as you mentioned, literature, films, or I don't know, whatever, even comic books or whatever, helps, and it helps a lot. And for example, that is my case.
Yes, so if you can find something that interests you, you know, always having a context and a content is much better than just studying grammatical rules. You know, so. Other questions?
Out of university, for example, in a short period of time, 2 or 3 months, what would you recommend us to do for improving our English or something like that? Looking for a job in the States, for example, what would you recommend us?
To improve your English?
Yeah.
3 months.
In 3 months. You have 3 months left to get ahead. I think all of these things that we mentioned, right? So I really recommend a lot reading, because reading helps tremendously, more than you can imagine, because reading is a form of input that you have no idea. When I'm on vacation, I always pick a novel. It has to be something that's pleasurable for you, not something where you're looking up every other word, I tell my students, but I'm often reading. But for you, if you can, obviously, if you can find somebody that you can sit down, we used to say conversation partners. Now there are a lot of these kinds of opportunities on the internet if you look for them, you know, to practice. And also, you just need to find every opportunity you can. So get on the internet, do some reading, watch some videos, try to find, I think that I was exploring your website a little bit for English, and I see that they have they have listed all kind of opportunities in Madrid to go get together and have conversations with people, right? Or go to a cooking class, or go to, what was it, some kind of exercise class in English. So these look fun, and maybe you can also meet some people that you can get together informally and practice. So it takes a little effort, but if you have the interest and the motivation, then just use all of your resources. What else?
I'd like to know, what do you think about the different systems, different e-learning systems there are on the internet? Or
I haven't tried them all, but some of them are fairly basic, just vocabulary words and pronunciation, you know. So I've tried some of them on my iPad, and so far I haven't found one that's, you know, really impressive. What I want to do is try to learn, for instance, pick a language that I have no idea, like Japanese, and see how far I can actually get with that. I don't think it's going to be very far. There's also Rosetta Stone is one that's really, you know, you hear a lot about and you see a lot published about it. So I don't personally own that, so I can't really comment too much about effectiveness, but we also use, you know, things like Tell Me More, but I would never say, I'm not one to say that one of those software applications is going to take the place of your classwork and your effort too, because there's no one on the other end that's a live person that's talking to you. So ultimately, that's what you need. And so that's why the virtual software, meeting software, or Skype are going to be even better. And it's more motivating for you because you're talking to a real person. You know? Anything else? Thank you. Yes?
It is true that English countries are looking for Spanish people to teach our language.
To teach Spanish? Yes, of course. It's really great to have native speakers. You know, and we have a lot of Spanish speakers already in the U.S., right? Native Spanish speakers, we have lots of them. But there are also opportunities for Spaniards to go and get some training. You can look into graduate programs and such. A lot of times they are looking to see that you have some background in teaching already, but sometimes not. But also we're facing the similar issues that you all are here. You know, with there have been a lot of cutbacks for teachers in Ohio. I saw. Now, Spanish isn't the language that they seem to be cutting, but it doesn't seem to really make sense to cut out a French program and then hire a new Spanish teacher. So, of course, there are more popular languages now than Spanish, like Chinese and Arabic. You know, a lot of schools are wanting to offer Chinese now, but for sure, it's nice to have some native speaker colleagues and professors that are native speakers. Other questions?
In the place you live, the most second language taught is Spanish?
Yes. Spanish is the most popular because students think it's easy, right? and then when they start, they realize, okay, no language is easy, you know, no language. Of course, Spanish is easier than French grammar, Italian grammar are a little bit more complicated, right? They think that pronunciation-wise, you know, French seems a little more difficult. And of course, you know, Chinese, it's going to take you longer. You need to start really itty-bitty to get anywhere with some of the more difficult languages. So it's popular because students think that it's easy.
So we leave it here. Yes. Thank you very much for
thank you.
Your visit.
Thank you for coming.
And you're welcome to come back when you want.
Thank you.